Hey everybody, my name is Kevin Badway, and I posting a video that I know that a lot of people are probably going to take sides one way or the other, and that's fine. You're more than welcome to do so. I'm kind of new to this, so pardon me if I seem somewhat unprofessional with not having all the displays and stuff that goes on and all the bells and whistles that go along with a lot of people who have wonderful videos and a lot more entertaining. I'm just basically right now starting out, and I just want to basically share ideas and thoughts about different issues and topics and subjects, um, basically to create dialogue, to spark interest, to get people to think about things in a particular light that maybe they haven't thought about before. I don't claim to be all knowing. I don't claim to have all the information. I obviously admit and be humble enough to know that I don't know everything there is about a particular subject, but I just try to look at things rationally, logically, from a point of view, and I want to do so by saying, first of all, uh, I do believe in God, or I believe in a God. I believe in the God of the Bible, the Holy Bible. I believe in Christ, but I'm not here to preach to you. I'm not here to try to get you to be swayed one way or the other. Um, uh, but I do expect you to research things and try to find out for yourself because it's important to you. Uh, I'm not here to bash anybody over the head or condemn people for not believing or this, that, and the other. Whether you choose to believe or not is your baggage, not mine. And I don't claim to have all the facts or claim to be knowing of everything. I have to be humble enough to admit that I know that some of the things I may say may be in error, maybe not 100% factual. I understand that. But if anybody can prove me wrong about something I say, please show me the light. Please lead me in that direction. I'm always willing to accept new information. I don't think you're ever going to be able to discourage me from believing in God just because of my life's experiences. And those are things that I'll probably share in other videos later. But like I said, this is not a video about preaching or this and the other. This particular video is about bringing to light things that I find kind of what strange about the scientific understanding of the origin of the universe and evolution, so to speak. The Bible doesn't refute evolution, at least not in the natural sense, the natural order of things, as far as you know, um, cross pollination and flowers becoming other flowers, or so forth, so on, or even different species. Different breeds rather, but not necessarily different species. I mean, no time in the history of mankind has ever been able to witness one species evolving into an entirely different species. However, we do have different breeds of things, like different breeds of dogs or different breeds of cats, and so forth and so on. But that being said, I want to propose this idea, this ideology to you, and because this will be a short video, but this is just basically a summation. So let me clarify, this is a summation. I'm not going to elaborate, so I'm going to be cutting through a lot of details per se, which I know that a lot of you who are into the scientific community and the scientific way of thinking are probably going to want to be more detailed and say, well, you have to get into the molecular structure and the proteins and the amino acids and so forth and so on, and this took this and this, that, and the other. I understand all that. But realistically, what I'm trying to understand is why it is easier for you to believe in one particular idea or ideology or theory than, say, the idea of a God. Now, there's the way I look at it, there's mechanical science and theoretical science. Now, the reason why I say that is because as far as mechanical science goes or is concerned, that's basically understanding how things operate. You dissect a frog, you understand the organs inside, and the tendons, and you understand what makes it twitch and what makes it and how it breathes and so forth and so on. Or you dissect a flower or or anything, and you get down to the nitty gritty. You take a watch and you take it apart and you see all the gears in it and you understand that, okay, well, this is what makes it run, and this is, you got to put these parts together and so forth and so on. Mechanical science, understanding how things work. Fine. The Bible doesn't contradict any of that. But then there's theoretical science, basing a lot of theories and presumptions and assumptions, trying to explain this, that, and the other, is kind of where we kind of have a shady area here, a slippery slope, if you will, that a lot of people in the science community take liberty with to best understand their environment of how things work in the mechanical sense, but it's not necessarily entirely true. For example, the theory of relativity is a theory. Now, you can say it's a fact, but if it's a fact, why don't you call it the fact of relativity? To me, and I know I'm nitpicking here because I'm a lyrical person. I believe in being literal, But if you're going to say I have a theory about something, that doesn't mean it's a fact. I have a theory. I have an idea. I'm conceptualizing this. And there may be a lot of evidence that you've done that kind of leads you in that direction, but it still doesn't make it 100% accurate or apropos. And I know someone out there in the science community is going to say, no, we've proven that the theory of relativity is actually true, and the universe bends, and so forth and so on. Okay, before we get into that, and that might be a different video altogether, but let me just ask you this. For those of you who do not want to believe in God or believe in, I don't want to say religion, because religion is, I'm a non-religious Christian. Let me state off right there. So I don't partake in religious dogma or doctrine. I don't go to church. I don't subscribe to a particular ideology within the church. My personal viewpoint is, in order to understand God or Christ, you have to develop a personal relationship with them. You may or may not have that personal relationship, but if you do, I think that by praying for discernment and praying for His wisdom and His guidance, that He'll lead you to certain truths that will help enlighten you to see things a little bit more clear, without having to reveal too much. You know what I'm saying? Because the human mind can only handle so much information, and a lot of it truly would blow our minds. So that being said, let's go back to the origin of the universe. Let's go back in time. So the universe, they say, is expanding. So let's take it back to that central point where it's reducing backwards in time, collapsing, going get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, I know there's going to be people who disagree with me, but one time I heard actually Neil Tyson have the cojones to say on the Stephen Colbert Show, and I just want you to know, to this day I can't find that episode anywhere. So people are going to probably say I'm making it up and I'm dreaming this or whatever. That's fine. I know what I saw and I know what I heard. But this is one of the many times he was on the Stephen Colbert Show, and he was actually the first guest to come out on this particular episode. And he said to Stephen Colbert, he says, and this was like really quickly into the interview, he says, "I'm going to blow your mind. Let's go back into the beginning of the universe, right? To the origin of the universe." He said, "Now I want you to think, or I want you to imagine two black holes collide, and that creates the Big Bang." Now, as soon as I heard that, right off the bat, I'm thinking, dude, that was like the dumbest thing you could say. Matter of fact, there's a lot of people who will say, Neil would never say that. That is stupid. No, he wouldn't have said something like that or whatever. Which is probably the reason why you can't find it anywhere, because they probably pulled it knowing that it did sound kind of bizarre and erroneous or whatever. Because here's the thing. According to the basic model of the Big Bang, it took quite a bit of time before the first stars came into existence. But he said that there were two black holes that collided and created the Big Bang. Well, anybody in the scientific field knows that basically, typically, a black hole is a dying star that collapses upon itself and creates a gravitational pull so strong that nothing can escape from it, not even light. Now, if that's basically true, in the belief of how a black hole is formed, then that would suggest that these two black holes had once been two stars. So from the Christian standpoint, we're asking you, Neil Tyson, or anybody in the science community, what created the stars? Thus, you really can't have an answer for that, right? So there has to be something else. There has to be an argument from the scientific community that there was nothing, and then something came into being. Of course, again, from the Christian community, we're asking you, well, what created this thing? If you say that a quark, something smaller than an atom exploded, a singularity, a single cell singularity exploded, and created the Big Bang, we would still ask you what created that quark, right? Again, you have no answer. But what you want to say is that prior to this quark exploding, there was nothing. Time didn't even exist. So basically, there was an infinity of nothingness before this quark even existed. It's kind of hard for the human mind to fathom that, to wrap its mind around that. But we do not know how long prior to this quark exploding, if it did, in fact, how long of nothingness existed. So space, basically, theoretically, I guess you would say, would be infinite. Now the Bible says God says, I'm the Alpha, the Omega, the first and the last. There was nothing before me. There'll be nothing after me, which means God is eternal, which means God is infinite. So that means that there was a long time of existence before there was even our existence beginning. Okay. But I have a theory about that, but I'll save that for another video, which will be really intriguing and kind of like make people go, huh, I never looked at it that way. But that's a little teaser. But so let's just go back to the quark idea, right? Let's just start with the quark, and it exploded. Now within this quark, right? Before it exploded, let me explain something. When a bomb explodes, right? Nothing greater than its mass. When it explodes, when it explodes, there's nothing greater than its original mass when all these shrapnel and parts are flying, right? Everything is smaller than the original thing that exploded, right? So that would, unless you put it in, say, side of a mountain or a hill or this, that, and the other, and of course it would blow off big chunks of rock or this, that, and the other, and that would be greater than the bomb itself or the size thereof I'm talking about. However, this is a cell. And in this space, this vast unit of space, depending on how vast it was at the time, because nobody can really calculate per se, it would stand to reason that there was nothing else there, right? There was no solid bodies, there was no stars, no planets, no moons, no asteroids, meteors, or anything like that. We just had a quark that exploded, which meant that within that, there were smaller pieces of this thing, this quark, being exploded out into the universe. However, science wants to say to you, well, at the moment, at the Planck time of time, at that, I mean, instantaneously, less than a split second, that there was a massive expenditure of energy, right? Now, within this expansive, a massive, expansive amount of energy in it, you had immediately things coming together and forming various elements and matter and even antimatter. And they say that, well, the matter, there was more of the matter than the antimatter, but somehow none of the antimatter collided with the antimatter. I mean, none of the antimatter collided with the matter, because that would have been even more devastating. So apparently they avoided one another. And so within this time frame, the universe is heating up really quickly, or the surrounding area of space is heating up very hot, and all these elements are forming this, that, and the other. But again, there's no rocks or stars or planetoids yet. It's all just cells kind of bounding off one another and combining with each other and forming certain elements. Now, before I go any further down the rabbit hole on this, I want you to understand that within this tiny quark, mind you, according to science, is the map skull of life. Everything in this quark, before it exploded, contained all the information that would explain how we came to be, how things work, the laws of physics. The laws of physics are contained in this tiny quark. Now, I don't know about you, but to me that sounds like a plan. Everything contained, all the information contained here of how organisms are to work, how they're to grow, how they're to evolve, how they're to whatever, to expand, how to create life. Everything is contained within this. That's a lot of information. Now, we dropped a bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and we've dropped hydrogen bombs, and we've seen pretty massive explosions. And I don't know how they would react if you put a nuclear bomb in space, but we've seen how self-contained it was here on Earth, right? It only went so far and did so much damage. But this is a little cell. This isn't a bomb. This isn't a fat bomb. This isn't big boy. This is, Fat Boy or whatever they call those bombs. This is smaller than an atom. But you're going to believe that within this tiny little quark, it created a massive amount of energy that exponentially grew and created the very fundamental foundation of the universe by eventually, mind you, if I could do my best Carl Sagan, billions and billions of years it took in order for these molecules and various particles to come together to be able to solidify and create the very fundamental basic amino acids and stuff like that that created the foundation of life, such as planetoids and moons and orbits and galaxies and so forth. Now, it's always interesting that in science, in order to best make their theory work, it takes obviously a lot of time, billions of years, just to get to a certain point, right, in the evolutionary process. But I digress. So after this huge explosion, billions of years are progressing, or whatever you want to use, and stars are forming and beginning to form, but that took about 1 billion years for that to happen. And then, the stars are basically needed, because they give off light and they give off whatever. But anyway, eventually some of these things start to kind of branch off into their own little galaxies, right? Their constellations and so on, but they're galaxies. And all the galaxies look basically the same, almost like a hurricane, right? The little swirl thing with the big ball in the middle. They're all kind of uniform. Now, this is supposed to be a chaotic environment. There's randomization here. According to scientific theory, this is all random. This is not by design. It just happened, right? So they want you to believe this. This is a random act of happenings that take billions of years to get to this singularity we call the Earth, right? So after all this, and billions of years have transgressed or have traversed the time of space to get to this point where now we have our solar system, the Milky Way, right? Our galaxy. And our planet, right, just happens to end up in a pretty good spot. Probably the best spot ever, right? As far as we know, to this day, the best spot ever. Because it just happened to be in the right location for life to grow, right? But this was a hot molten rock, right? There was no atmosphere, there was no stratosphere, there was no troposphere, there was no thermosphere, there was no exosphere, there was no ionosphere, right? This was just a hot molten rock, lava flowing everywhere, and this and that and the other, and it was emitting gases such as methane and sulfuric gas, right? Gases. Now, at this time, the Earth had no atmosphere to contain. The only thing the Earth had was its own, if you want to say, gravitational pull. Okay? Now, the thing is, these are gases. Gases are lighter, right? And they rise. But because there's nothing to contain the gases, you're in the vacuum of space. So technically speaking, the vacuum of space, because there's nothing to contain these gases, would be sucking the gases right off the Earth. But science says, well, we got to find a way to create an environment that encompasses and withholds these gases, so it creates a sphere over the Earth so that the gases can't escape, right? So you come up with a theory about that, and okay, that's all fine. But again, you've got methane and sulfuric gases, and those things would kill anything trying to live outright, right? But at this particular time, there's really no microbes of anything, unless you want to say the microbes existed back in the process of, the cataclysmic explosion that happened or occurred. But somehow microbes appeared. But it seemed like the sulfuric acid would have killed anything like that off. But whatever the case, over a period of time, let me guess, millions of years, that the gases subsided so much, and that the sulfuric clouds and methane clouds kind of subclouded, and eventually the molecules for oxygen and water and hydrogen kind of came together, and all of a sudden they had the first, rain, real rain, not acid rain, not sulfuric rain, not methane rain, not even purple rain, purple rain. Anyway, so that being said, eventually the regular rain gave us regular water, and it cooled the earth, and a lot of the things subsided. Now, of course, when it's wet and it's a hot molten rock, it's going to create more steam and more gases. It was probably like a huge sauna, a really hot sauna, hotter than anything you could imagine. But whatever the case is, eventually the earth cooled, and the crevices, the huge crevices. I mean, if you removed the water from the earth right now, it would look weird. It would look pretty like a really weird looking rock. It looked like an asteroid, right? It wouldn't look like a sphere. But that being said, the water, the rain, filled up the oceans and created rivers and lakes and so forth and so on. And of course, millions of years of erosion eventually created what we now have as the continents today, right? Okay, fine. But within the early beginning stages of this rain, you had your first microorganisms or single-celled organisms starting to appear. Now, this is basically in a nutshell, so bear with me, because I know some of you scientific wizards are going to respond and try to break it down more scientifically than I ever could. But basically, the theory, as it would go, is that the first single-celled organisms appeared in the water, right? The essence of life, the beginning of life, so to speak. And you have these kind of amoebas, right? And these amoebas that kind of grew and moved and flowed and changed shapes and this and that and the other. Now, eventually, over a period of time, millions of years, the amoeba started to evolve into a tadpole of sorts, right? And so more than one amoeba, there was a few other amoebas that probably evolved into tadpoles as well. But eventually, these tadpoles, these little things floating around, all of a sudden, after millions of years, evolved into various forms of fish, right? Now, and granted, I'm covering a lot of time here, mind you, because I don't have 24 hours to break this down in detail. But basically, in essence, eventually you started to have different forms of fish. Don't know how many different varieties there were. Probably not as near the variety that we have today, but nonetheless, it started out with some kind of fish. Of course, millions of years later, you eventually got a fish that, maybe not within a million years, but you probably had a fish that finally got the gumption to come up out of the water, and all of a sudden he could actually, breathe the air, and he was probably out for about a minute before he felt scared and decided to go back into the water where it was safe. But eventually, over time, he kept coming out and realized, hey, I can actually stay out here for a little bit longer. And so these became the first amphibians, right? Now, of course, this wasn't just one particular species of amphibians, because they all these different other tadpoles had to mutate, and all these different amoebas and fishes and amphibians, whatever, had to mutate to become these different species that we have, obviously, over a period of time. But again, we're going back to the DNA, right? That if you went back to that single cell quark, or that whatever that exploded, it contained all this information for this to occur. It would have to. It would have to. Because there's no other explanation for that. It would have to contain all that information, right? So that being said, the ones that made it out and actually could stay on land, there were some that decided to stay on land. Didn't want to go back to the water. Got tired of swimming around. Hated the water, right? So some of them evolved into reptiles and lizards and snakes and whatever. Oh my. And then some of them evolved into mammals. Don't know how you go from a fish to a mammal, but okay. Say whale's a mammal. Okay. So I guess we descended from whales. But whatever the case is, of course, this took millions and millions of years for this to happen, mind you, because this wasn't an overnight process by any stretch of the imagination. So that being said, those that became primates Eventually, various forms of monkeys and chimpanzees and apes. Of course, this took millions of years for them just to have different species in that itself as well. But that being said, eventually, apparently, according to scientific theory of evolution, we somehow, these primates, a particular form of monkey, decided to walk upright. Hey, I can stand on my feet. Look at what I can do. And all of a sudden, they began to act more, I guess, humanly, like we do now. Began to do things and slowly evolved into the first, what is known as man, Cro-Magnon man, Neanderthal man, and eventually man. Of course, this took millions of years. And so now, fast forward to here. You can wrap your mind around that scientifically. And I know you're going to break it down. You're going to get into the real nitty-gritty of the amino acids and all this stuff and how the things came together. I was just doing this to basically get there in a nutshell. That you have to really wrap your mind around this, going from the singularity cell of a quark exploding and billions of years later evolving into what we are here today. It's easier for you to wrap your mind around that than to believe that there is an all-powerful, all-knowing, omniscient, omnipotent creator. Now, if you can exclude the idea of your mind that it's a white guy in the clouds with a beard and mustache looking over the cloud for every little thing you do, that's the cartoonish, that's the comedic way of mocking God. That's not what God looks like, and that's not what God or who God is. So you have to understand that if you're going to do that, you got to get a clarification of who and what God is. You got to understand, and you don't really understand if you're basing it upon other people's interpretation. When people, when Michelangelo paints on the Sistine Chapel this image of God, right, and man, looks beautiful. It's a wonderful painting. But what a lot of people don't realize, it's a violation of the second commandment, right? The second commandment is, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness thereof of anything that is in the heaven or in the earth. Basically what that's saying is, don't do pictures of me, don't do paintings of me, or any God for that matter. Don't do sculptures, don't stained glass windows, pendants, anything like that. Because what you're doing is you begin to formulate an idea, an opinion of who and what you think God looks like, and you create a form of ownership. That's why you got white people praying to a white Jesus and black people praying to a black Jesus. And I'm like, if the Bible really wanted you to know what his ethnicity was, if there was such an ethnicity of God, then he would have made it abundantly, perfectly clear. Not gray area clear. You know what I'm saying? Because you can debate anything in the Bible that tries to sway you to think God looks like this or God looks like that. If God really wanted you to know, he would make it perfectly and abundantly clear. Absolutely no problem. Which you have to understand, and this is probably going to be considered by some to be heretical, maybe, and I don't mean for it to be, but God is energy. Yes, we are made in the form of God. If God was to manifest himself from what he is up there, down here, yes, he would look like us. We were created in his image of what he would look like here on earth. But if you were up in space or you were up in there, what they call the heavens, he wouldn't look like what we think he would look like here on earth. He's beyond that. But they don't teach this in church, and they don't do that because they like to preach to you that he's basically a guy and so forth and so on or whatever. And he's the Father. That's true. There is the masculine aspect of God and what he is. And I know some of you are going to say, oh, no, God is a goddess and he's a woman. I'm like, don't blaspheme God. If you don't believe in God, that's your prerogative and you have every right to whatever, but don't mock him and don't blaspheme. And I'm not saying that because I'm just trying to clean things up here. I'm just saying that for your benefit, because mocking God is not a good and healthy thing for you to do. I know some of you don't believe in God, and that's your prerogative. And if you're right, you got nothing to worry about. But you got to look at this scientifically as well as realistically now. If you don't believe in God, and you don't believe you have a purpose for being here, and that you're just basically born out of cosmic dust, there's no reason for you to be here whatsoever. There's no reason for morality. There's no reason for morality. Your only argument for morality is, well, we need to be a civilized society. Who says? Well, we can't run amok. We can't have anarchy. Why not? Well, because we need to be civilized. Who says? Because you think that it's somehow going to better you? Why? What's the purpose? You're only here for a temporary part of time, right? You have no reason of existence for being here. You were born out of cosmic dust. You don't think there's a plan. You don't think there's a creative design in the process. You think that you're just a random act of particles that came together over billions and billions of years, assimilated together for what? To exist for, in the grand scheme of things, less than a second here on Earth? In the overall time expenditure of the universe, you're here for this amount of time? Is that what you believe? So why not go out there and do all these bad things? They're not bad because there's no such thing as morality. Because there is no God and there is no devil. You don't have to answer to the devil. You don't have to answer to God. So why not run amok and do what you want to do? Why not? If you don't believe in God. I'm not encouraging anybody to do anything wrong. But I just don't understand how you can make the argument of trying to be a civilized society. What's the reason for it? Because there's no such thing as morality to a universe that has no desire for morality, that has no plan for it, has no need for it. If there's no purpose for it, if there's no reason for you to be here, do what you want to do. Rape, pillage, and plunder. Do whatever you want to do. Steal from your friends. Go in the store. Steal your food. Do whatever. Do it. Yeah. But you don't want to do it. Why? Because there's repercussions to pay. Because you know that if you get caught, you'll probably go to jail. And if you kill somebody, you'll probably get the death penalty. Or you might, depending on where you live, get tortured to where you beg for death. But you don't want that because you want to live in a peaceful environment. Because for the short time that you are here, you want to enjoy life, which is the reason why you want to make a claim for having a secular life. You want to enjoy women, and women want to enjoy men, and you want to have all the sex you want and all that. You want to have your cake and eat it too, but the end result is that's a short amount of pleasure, limited time. Because along with that, you get all the baggage that goes along with it. You go through all the trials and tribulations that go along with it. You go through the breakups, you go through the stalking, and you go through the fights and the cheating and everything that goes, and you wonder why your relationships are dysfunctional. You wonder why marriages are breaking up, why kids are becoming sexualized, why everything is going on so negatively. Is it God's fault? No. See, God is free will absolute, and you have the right to choose to do whatever you want to do. You're part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. Because if you were part of the solution, you'd be trying to correct a lot of these things that are going on negatively in the world. In order for you to do that, you have to admit that you need to have some kind of morality other than just, well, we're just here, we need to be civilized. No. You can't have God without morality, and you can't have morality without God. You can argue that point all you want to and try to make a case for it, but you have no need for morality if there is no God. Pure and simple. And if there is anything within that quark that exploded eons ago, billions of years ago, and all that information contained within that, the maps go of life, the instructions for life, and our existence, and how things operate when it comes to laws, the physics Laws of physics, the scientific laws, everything, all the principles. No matter how you slice it, dice it, saute it, flambe it, put it in a skillet and grill it, that is design. Because that's saying we have a purpose. When this explodes, there's a purpose. And within it, we have this information that no matter where we end up, this is what can happen. Because within this has the building blocks of how things are supposed to work scientifically. Period. You cannot argue science without design, because that quark that you say was the essence, the epicenter of the Big Bang, has design written all over it. If it has DNA, that's a program. And if it's a program, that means it has a designer. So therefore, if there's a designer, that means there's a God. Because somebody had to write that program. If you took a watch and you took away all the parts, all the guts out of it, and including the casing, and you took it out in space and you put it up in space and just threw it out there and let the parts go randomly, right? Do you seriously think, I don't care if it's 1 billion years, I don't care if it's 1 trillion years or 1 gazillion years, do you think those parts are going to come together and reassemble themselves and become a watch again? I know you've heard that argument before about the watchmaker, and I'm not trying to rehash that argument, but I'm just saying, if you threw all these things out in space and let them go, do you really think they'd come back together and somehow over a period of time would eventually come back together and reassemble themselves? No. Because it took something to create something. But within that thing, you tear it apart. You can't expect it to come back together and reassemble. You destroy it, and you begin to manipulate it. You begin to interfere with the genetics of mankind. And we're talking about like stem cell research and cloning and all kinds of weird stuff that they do scientifically nowadays. You start tampering with the human body or animals or whatever, that and the other, and you start configuring things, you can't get it to go back to being what it was. It's like a person who's transgendered. Once that man cuts off his penis, you can sew a new one on, but it's not going to be the same. Once you start tampering with it with hormones and this and the other, you can't change. That's why a lot of people who have been transgendered end up regretting it. Because they had this fantasy of what they thought it would be like, and they realize things are not living up to that fantasy. And I guarantee you, any transgender person who doesn't look good, didn't look the way they thought they were going to look, probably would be unhappy. If Laverne Cox looked ugly, you think she'd be happy? You think people would be talking to her? No. People would be blowing her off. She makes a living because she looks halfway decent. RuPaul, even though not technically transgender per se, but with the makeup, this and the other, people will respond. But if she was an ugly cross-dresser or trainee, whatever, do you think people really pay as much attention to her? Probably not. Or him, or whatever. Probably not. You start tampering with things against the way things were initially designed to be. You can't. You could change clothes, but what you change your body, your biological structure, chemical structure, this and the other, you can't get it to go back to normal. You wonder why there's so much mental illness going on. You wonder why there's so much confusion and stuff like that going on. You got to get into the rabbit hole. You got to figure out, hey, when you start tampering with the environment, when you start tampering with your food, when you start tampering with a lot of things that are affecting the brain, that are affecting your body, it's not natural. We're not supposed to be overweight. We're not supposed to be obese. We're not supposed to be sick. We're not supposed to have cancer. We're not supposed to have any of these things. We brought it about upon ourselves because of what? Science. For those of you who love science so much, keep in mind, the very thing that you love is killing you. Don't you understand that? Cell phones, radiation, nuclear radiation, from nuclear blast, the ocean, the Pacific Ocean is filled with radiation. All the pollutants in the atmosphere. People want to say the sun is the problem. Let's blame the sun for skin cancer. Hey, what about all those lotions you put on your skin? What about the fact that you live in a city that's got smog and various pollutants in the atmosphere? And the jet planes emitting whatever they emit up in the sky, filtering down. And I'm not even talking about the chemtrails. I'm talking about, just regular planes, things that are in our atmosphere. But let's blame the sun. Oh, let's blame the water. We live in a perpetual state of fear because the people, the powers that be, who are putting these products out to try to appease your mind, have got you afraid of the very thing that are keys to your life. The sun and the water are keys to your existence. And yet you want to blame the sun for skin cancer, but you don't want to blame the pharmaceutical companies. You don't want to blame the lotion companies and Avon and Mary Kay and all the other Yves Saint Laurent and whatever that makes these products that you rub on your skin. Your skin is the biggest organ of the whole body. It absorbs these things that you put on there, the colognes and the perfumes, because you want to make yourself smell good, and you wonder why you get sick. You think eating organically is going to make you healthier? What's wrong with you? These people are manipulating you and your mindset because they think if you do this, this will happen. This is what will make you better. This will make you healthier. Yes, I agree. Changing your diet and exercise, yes. It's not a guarantee you're going to live longer, though. You could do all the exercise you want and eat all the healthy food you want and walk right outside and get hit by a car, especially in California. But what is the reason for you being here? Because there is none. And when this is it, when life is over, when you're dead, that's it, right? If that's what you believe. So do what you want, right? Because you don't have to answer to God. I said I'm not going to preach to you, and I'm not. But I can tell you, each and every one of you who are watching this video, that God is real, and I know it for a fact. I know it for a fact. Because of my experiences. No, I didn't see him. No, I didn't see something in toast. No, I didn't see something on a wall or in the clouds. I just know from my experiences. And I'll share those in other videos if you're interested or if you want to know. But I know. And I've doubted him. Don't get me wrong. I'm like you. I've been one of those guys who doubted and say, okay, man, whatever. Yeah. If you're real, why would you let me go through this and all this stuff? The reason why we go through all the pain and suffering is because we're dealing with spiritual warfare, people. We're dealing with two sides pulling at us. And God is saying, you know what? I'm not going to pull on you. I've given you the information. I've told you what you need to do. I've given you the building blocks. I've given you the laws. I told you what you need to do. You can do that. You do what I ask you to do, I got you. God is telling you he's got you. The devil, that voice in your head, that ain't what God said. Don't believe that. I can explain to you how things happen. I got a way of getting you to look at things and observing things that make you realize this is actually how it happened. The thought of doubt. See, the devil doesn't care whether or not you believe in him or God. All he cares about is the fact that you doubt. And as long as you doubt, he's got you. See, that the tree of knowledge of good and evil. People say, oh, it was an apple. No, it wasn't. It wasn't a pomegranate. It wasn't an onion. It wasn't a tomato. That tree of knowledge of good and evil basically, in essence, was the fruit of doubt, the fruit of question, the fruit of wonderment, the fruit of questioning your existence, questioning authority, questioning the truth. Because God knew that once you started to ask questions, you would start to go down that rabbit hole. You'd start to go down these little avenues that took you this way and that way and took your focus off the Creator, the one that gave you everything to sustain you in your life, and you chose against it because you want to try to explain things. You want to figure out how things work. God doesn't have a problem with you wanting to know how things work, but God knows that you don't have the wisdom to do with that which you understood how it works and operates. Look at to this day. Of all the wars that we've had up until today, of all the hatred and violence that we have had up until today, you would think we as human people have learned our lessons, and we have not. Why? Because we are becoming more and more godless. Because we choose to go the other route. Thinking science is going to be that savior. Science is going to deliver us from all this pain and tragedy. But in fact, it's been the cause of it. Mechanical science is what created the guns and the bombs that have killed people. God didn't create it. Man's greed, his passion for expanding, is what made America the way it is. Slavery, as wrong as it is, as bad as it is what I would call a necessary evil. It was needed, but it's still evil, because America would not be the country it is today if it wasn't for slavery. But unfortunately, the people that died building this country don't get the respect they deserve to this day for the suffering they went through. I don't want to hear about the Holocaust. Black people went through a whole hell of a lot more worse in this country than the Jewish people did in Nazi Germany. I would stand to reason that there would probably be a lot of Africans back in the days of slavery that would have loved to have been gassed than to have to go through what they went through. To be lynched and whipped and beaten and mutilated, raped, families broken apart, all that stuff. I'm pretty sure that whatever, they had it bad too. As a matter of fact, every race in some form or fashion have had their plights. Everybody deserves to be loved and listened to and say, hey man, sorry for what happened, man. Apologize. Let's try to make this a world better. You would think we have learned this. And today we're still fighting. Today we're still arguing. Today we're still debating. Today we're still can't get on the same page. And you wonder why things are going on the way they're going on? Because many of you who have turned away from God have chose to listen to the devil, but you don't believe in the devil. So you try to look for a rational way of understanding things, and you look for the most logical conclusions to best somehow describe what it is for your existence, for being here. And you still don't even have a clue because you can't even agree. You know the science doesn't agree. Every five, it's like every time I turn on the news, one day it's like, oh, scientists have said that coffee is actually bad for you and can cause cancer. And then I guarantee you 6 months later, they'll come out with a new report. Actually, scientists have discovered that coffee is actually quite good for you and that it actually helps kill cancer cells and helps back and this and that and the antioxidants and blah, blah, blah. And I guarantee you another 6 months later, it's bad again. Don't you realize that you are being confused deliberately? You do not know what is right or what is wrong. No matter what you do, you only believe what has been told to you and what you've been taught. And if it doesn't make sense to you, you look for other ways and other avenues. Look, I don't understand everything that God does. I don't understand everything that's in the Bible. That doesn't make it less true. It just means I have to understand my limitations in my wisdom, trying to discern this, that, and the other that I need to know. But what I do know is what's most important. And what's most important is knowing that God does exist, knowing that he does care about us, that he does love us enough that he was willing to have a sacrifice for us so that we could be saved. That's what's important. God is trying to give you a way out, man. Because he knows you're suffering. He knows your trials and tribulations. He knows your struggles. And he knows why you're turning away from him. If you could just understand that, if you could just come to the realization of why you're turning away from him, then maybe you can say, you know what? Like that old saying, if you continue to do what you've always done, you'll always get what you got. Maybe if you did the opposite. Maybe if you decided to try to listen to the Lord a little bit better, try to develop a relationship with him, try to understand him, allow him the opportunity to show you the truth. Look, I'm not going to say it's going to happen overnight. I know some of you are going to say, well, I went to church and I saw the hypocrisy. Hey, I'm right there with you. That's one reason why I don't go to church. God is not a hypocrite. Man is. But you got a choice. Do you listen to man or do you listen to God? How do you listen to God? Well, God sent us the Holy Spirit, right? Christ said when he leaves, he was going to send us the Holy Spirit to comfort us in our times of trials and tribulations, right? Christ is our advocate. He's the one that is our mediator. When we talk to God, when we pray to God, we pray to God in Christ's name, saying, Christ, I need you to speak on my behalf. Because you're the only one that'll listen to me anyway. And he'll talk on your behalf. He'll intercede on your behalf. He'll make a case for you because you put forth that effort. Are you going to pray for a loved one who's in the hospital and they still die? Yeah. Is that God's fault? No. Sometimes it's just people's time to go. Sometimes it's just it. Sometimes people just give up. There are people who've been shot 20 times. They're in the hospital and their will to survive is so strong, they live. Some people just give up. Say enough is enough. I'm tired. I'm ready to go. And when that happens, they move on. Right, wrong, or indifferent, sometimes it just happens. It's not God's fault. God doesn't force anybody to come to the light. He doesn't drag you by the arm. He still allows you up to even that point to make a choice. That's the most beautiful thing about free will, is even there on your deathbed, even though you're above the plane, God is still saying, I'm giving you a choice. And sometimes people just realize, you know what? I'm a lot happier here because it's a lot more peaceful. This makes a lot more sense now. I get it. It's just a shame that sometimes people have to die in order to get it. But unless you accept Christ, unless you accept God, and you don't get it, you're not going to get it. You won't get to see paradise. You won't get to see that plane of existence that is beyond your rationale and understanding. Right now, you're just so caught up in science fiction and what they put out there that just makes more sense to you than anything. And I don't get it. Don't get me wrong. Mechanical science, I understand. I get it. Theoretical science doesn't have a leg to stand on. Theory of how we got here is about as erroneous as you can get. And the fact that you can wrap your mind around that, the thing that you could say, I believe that billions of years ago, a single quark had all the information in it, and yet you still argue against design, creation, right? But in this work had all the information written on it that had everything we needed to exist here today. That makes more sense to you. Wow. That's delusionment. Disillusionment. It's delusional. But whatever the case, spent almost an hour. Didn't expect it to be this long. I kind of got carried away, and I apologize. But I thank you for watching this video if you did. I expect you to leave comments. I know some of you are going to be childish and troll. I would hope not. I'd hope that y'all would be mature. Ask questions. And if you have legitimate questions or legitimate replies, I'll respond. If you have information, things that you want me to look up, check it out, I will. But I'm just asking you to think about it. I'm just asking you to logically, rationally ask yourself, does that make a lot of sense? I know you're saying the same thing to me about, do you really believe that there's just some omnipotent being in the sky? No. See, again, you're trying to turn him into a cartoon. It's not some guy in the sky. That may be good for George Carlin and his jokes. That may be good for comedians and cartoonists and so forth and so on, and that's how they want to depict God. But God is not a guy in the sky. He is an energy, an omnipotent, all-powerful energy. I would even go as far as to throw out sound. The reason why I throw out sound is because in John it says, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word is God. Word is something you speak, right? Now we know that the Word is referring to Christ, okay, in the book of John. But there's a lot of references to sound in the Bible. In fact, the origin of the universe began with sound. When God said, let there be, and it became. God said, God spoke, it became the sound that emanated from God. So if you want to say that the universe was created by sound waves, don't laugh. You'd be surprised how closer I am to the truth than the whole single cell theory of a quark having all the information that's supposedly not designed and doesn't have a designer, and taking billions upon billions of years before we evolved and got here. Anyway, this is Kevin. I'm signing off right now. I hope you enjoy it. Feel free to subscribe if you want, or don't, or write comments, or don't, or do whatever you want. But I hope you found this somewhat entertaining. what little bit it is. And like I said, I'm new, so hopefully I'll get better and have a nice backdrop and do all the things with the computer edits and stuff like that. Get very scientific about it. And make it more professional, because the way it should be. But that being said, thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful day or night, depending on what time you're watching this. I wish you the best. I hope that you come to find the truth. The truth shall set you free. I pray that each and every one of you will come to know the reality and the truth that God exists before it gets too late. The book of Revelation said that what's going on in the world today would come to pass. It's happening right now before your very eyes, people. Do not deny him before it's too late. Your salvation depends on it. It requires it. So, take care and have a good one. God bless. Take care of each other. Amen.